Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a book from Oxford University Press, and it's effectively a textbook. And I decided I would review this because I read some rather unflattering remarks about some of these books produced by OUP, and I wasn't very happy because I think the books are actually a lot better, and I thought, well, we will at least review one of the main books and try to set the record straight. The one I'm looking at has got the title Foundations for the LPC, Legal Practice Course 2015 to 16, now in the 19th edition. It's been written by quite a large number of people. I'm going to mention them straight away. Claire Firth, Elizabeth Smart, Catherine Wright, Lucy Crompton, Helen Fox, Frances Seabridge and Susan Wheelsworth. Now I'm going to mention someone else in a moment who I have met and known, and explain a little bit about why I think these books are rather better than some of the people have suggested with some of the review comments I've seen to date. Elizabeth and I have reviewed this book, and I've given it a title, First Class Legal Support Materials from Oxford University Press, because that's what they give us, and if students don't like the way it's produced, it is one of a variety of legal texts that are available. I happen to think this is quite a good book myself, and that's why I'm going to show it. There is the front, there is the actual spine, and then at the back you can see the structure. We are very much moving into an online resource centre era. You can see here that this is linked to what is called Law Trove. I'm not going to say too much about it, but I think one has got to understand today as a student, and I'm very old in comparison with the current modern students, and I never had any of this material, but a lot of this stuff is very much now linked to the net, the web, the internet, so therefore you've got to know how to use things. The book runs to 300 odd pages. There's an index at the back, which I think is detailed. It's page number indexing, which you'll see, not paragraph numbering, and you've got there are quite a lot of appendices at the back there. Now we go to the front of the book. It's A4 size, so it's quite easy to photocopy. There is the detail about who's produced this book and the very large amount of work and the content, the individual structure of the book throughout. Then you've got the OUP detail there. Then you've got the actual parts as set out, which is actually in many ways that some of the basic information, certainly when I looked at it, the areas that were directly interesting to me as a barrister, not a solicitor, were professional conduct and human rights. Then at the back you've got answers to self-examination or self-test questions, then various other things, SRA information and so on. Then you've got the detailed contents after that. Then you've got a preface from Claire Firth, which sets out where she's coming from. She's taken over from Zoe, so it's quite important. Then you get onto the online resource centre itself. And then after that you get acknowledgements and tables of cases and so forth. You've got statutes and statutory instruments there too. Then you get, after that, you've got international, that's becoming very much more important now, and you've also got codes of conduct, which for this publication is very important. Then you go straight into professional conduct, which is that first chapter, part 1. And then you see how it's structured. It's paragraph numbering, and it's trying to set out very clearly with some diagrams what you've got. Then you move on to things much more detailed. Money laundering is very important. It's important for us at the bar, especially in public access, which is what I do. So therefore you can understand that. Then you get much greater detail for areas such as wills and wills and so forth. And then right at the end is the bit which I said I thought again was very important, which is actually on human rights, which touches everything that we do. Now that's the book itself, and I'm sure, bearing in mind that this is very much what I would describe as the in-house style of OUP, and I've used a lot of their books as teaching materials, and I understand some people won't like the way that they are produced, but I happen to think it's one of the better ways of doing it. Excuse me. So let me tell you about why this book, I think, and the way it's structured, is actually the way that teaching is going. And there are going to be people who want teaching done in a particular way, but I think we have to recognise for most people this is actually, we are at quite a high standard in terms of the communication of materials from teacher to student. And I think this sort of publication with the online link, Law Trove and so forth, I think does actually assist a great deal in the learning process and your learning outcomes. Now, the OUP, through their main publications from practitioners and academics, and also with their online service, which is Law Trove, offers students detailed information which can be well trusted, as OUP are highly reliable providers of some of the most useful legal learning materials around, and this is one of them, which is why I said I would do this review, because I wanted to set the record straight. We don't normally review some of these main court texts. I certainly haven't. I've done a few of the police manuals over the years, but not really this stuff. But I do recommend this particular title, which is for the foundations for the LPC, that's the legal practice course, covering the academic year 2015 to 16, which covers, of course, also the compulsory foundation areas of the LPC as set out in LPC outcomes. And this includes the following areas, which I've mentioned briefly: professional conduct, tax and revenue law, wills and administration of estates, and then, of course, you've got human rights at the end. The book, as I say, looks at the human rights matter at the end, because remember, it covers every aspect of what we do. It will eventually be revised, I'm sure, once they get down off their own personal high horses in Parliament and start looking at it sensibly. There will be some changes, but that's a way off, I think. Obviously, human rights law is a topic now taught across the LPC course because of its importance to everyday aspects of law, which I see on a daily basis in court. The authors, very detailed, very experienced and number of authors, have produced a lot of detail here, and they've created worked examples to make their points, and obviously the scenarios also help throughout the book to illustrate key points which they wish to make, which I believe is a really successful learning outcome for the LPC student. We recognise that the guide is an essential reading tool for all learners. It's also a most important, useful reference source for practitioners because it's so easy to forget things. Now, I don't normally go back to so long ago, I don't normally go back to my original student textbooks. Sometimes I do, because it's amazing how actually the simple things can sometimes be a little more a bit sort of evasive. And so it's quite helpful sometimes just to refresh your memory and think, yes, I remember I did that some years ago. And I do think you'll find that quite helpful. We certainly advise that for the newer practitioner who's just recently qualified. As I say, the reason for that is easy to forget things, and there's so much to remember today. And to aid understanding then, and to test the understanding of the core materials for the course, there are checkpoints and summaries which feature in every chapter. I think of particular help is the online resource centre with the resources which now accompany the text, including useful web links, forms and diagrams which can be updated so much more quickly with the new interactive facility which is fast becoming the norm for teaching in legal matters and certainly elsewhere. That's something we have to face, and it's actually fundamental, I think, to the future of teaching. Now, the Foundations for the LPC book features coverage of the following areas of study which are set out in the contents, and I'm just going to mention those in case any of it's of relevance to you. The essential elements of the law and the areas which impact upon legal practice covered in detail, offering all the information needed to enable learners and tutors to work through these compulsory areas easily. And professional conduct, I do remember, even all those years ago, decades ago now, was one that they really didn't put as much emphasis onto it as they should have done. And I'm glad to see that there is more emphasis now, and it's actually explaining what you've actually got to do. There are also things for the diagrams, the flow charts and the worked examples and the specimen forms and so forth, there to ensure that the law is put into some form of context for you, and it enables the student to understand the practical application of the law. You've also got things like checkpoints and the summaries which allow you to access key points quickly, which I think is a most important forensic skill to adopt quite early on in your legal training. And it also provides a useful reference tool for summarising knowledge and revising the covered topics which the LPC requires. You've got the diagrams from the book, which are available to tutors on the online resource centre as well, in a format that can be used both in the classroom and in handouts. So it makes our lives, I think, as teachers much easier to live with. Also, there's access to the digital version of this book, which comes with every purchase, which gives a more flexible learning experience, I believe, for you, and is now very much in keeping with what modern students expect. And the new edition, of course, as I've indicated, is for the current academic year. It's the 19th edition, this one here. It's not said 19th, but that's what it is. So it's been around a long time. And what the authors have done is they've revised the book structure to ensure that the manual covers all the relevant practical law and financial information necessary for the LPC. Now, I want to just finish by saying that the team of writers has now changed, and I would like to mention the work of Zoe Orenshaw, whom I've met. Many of you will know she's now stepped down as the author because the new team have taken over. But Zoe did a huge amount of work. We feel that the work still retains its overall and outstanding status as one of a number of the OUP titles, which continue to maintain the highest teaching standards to make the lives of both students and teachers much better. I'd like to thank Zoe for what she did and thank the new team and wish them well. As I said, I wanted to set the record straight. That's the purpose of doing this. This is the manual. There are lots of them, but this is the one that I'm picked on specifically to do that and just show so people have got an idea. That's the back. Just opening it up, I'm looking here, entitlement to the estate. You can see the amount of detail that's in there. One of the things that I think Zoe certainly always had as a concept, and it's being continued, is getting the balance about the amount of information available. Because when you're actually creating these manuals, you've got to always bear in mind that you don't want to hit the student with too much. So I think the balance is right, and I certainly felt that with things like human rights. In fact, we're looking at human rights law in the context of Europe in that particular section there, looking at derogations and so forth. And if we just go to the front again, there's just starting off, there are a series of activities. I mean, I do come from a generation that didn't have activities, but I was forced to do them years later. And activities are quite useful because it breaks the boredom of reading the books. This is actual professional conduct, and it's suggested solutions to some of the activities. So you've got everything that you'd be looking at in terms of learning materials, and I'm actually quite happy with that. And I would certainly take the line that this is actually a first-class publication. So that's to balance out those people who were disappointed because they were looking for something else. But as I say, you're always going to get a few in the back. Thank you anyway to everybody concerned, and especially to OUP for the online and the Law Trove series. I think this is a great step forward and one that I'm certainly delighted to comment on and welcome. Thank you to all. Bye-bye.